I'm Nancy Cavey, National ERISA and IDI Disability Attorney. Welcome to Winning Isn't Easy. Before we get started, I've got to give you a legal disclaimer. This podcast is not legal advice. The Florida Bar Association says I have to say this, and now that I've said it, nothing will ever prevent me from giving you an easy-to-understand overview of the disability insurance world, the games that carriers play, and what you need to know to get the disability benefits you deserve. So today we're going to be discussing insights into the life with disability, and we're joined by our special guest, Ken Kunken. Ken, can you introduce yourself?
Sure. My name is Ken Kunken, and I live on Long Island, in Rockville Center, Long Island, and I'm a retired attorney.
Now, you also are going to be talking to us about advice that you would give to someone who has had a life-changing injury or medical condition, as you've had, and vocational insights into disability. And this is an issue that comes up in every one of my cases. My dad, for example, was a World War II combat vet in the Pacific. And when he came back from the war, he joined the family insurance company and bought a disability insurance policy through USF&G, hoping he would never have to deal with a claim for disability. And unfortunately, when I was in junior high school, he was diagnosed with leukemia. So Ken, I watched him until the day I graduated, struggle with disability, the change in his role from being the John Wayne breadwinner, if you will, to recognizing that he had to take care of his health because his health and his family came first. So I know that people like to understand what they're going to be facing and have an opportunity to speak with someone like you who has faced that challenge and done so brilliantly. So before we get started, we're going to take a quick break, and then we're going to come back and have Ken tell us all about his story and where he is today.
Have you been robbed of your peace of mind by your disability insurance carrier? You owe it to yourself to get a copy of Robbed of Your Peace of Mind, which provides you with everything you need to know about the long-term disability claims process. Request your free copy of the book at caveylaw.com today.
Welcome back to Winning Isn't Easy. Now, we're going to be spending time with Ken, and I've got 10 questions for him because I think he's got a lot of great insights. Before we did this podcast episode, he and I had a great discussion, and I think he's got a lot of great things to tell us. So Ken, please tell us your story.
Okay, in 1970, when I was 20 years old, I was a junior at Cornell University. I was studying industrial engineering, and I was playing on their lightweight football team. And in a game against Columbia University, I broke my neck and damaged my spinal cord, making a tackle on a kickoff. And as a result, I'm a quadriplegic. I'm almost totally paralyzed from the shoulders down. I spent the next 9 months and 20 days in various hospitals and rehabilitation centers before I was able to return to school. And I was fortunate that with help from my family, personal care attendants, and my fellow classmates, I returned to Cornell University, where I completed my undergraduate degree in industrial engineering. And I became the first quadriplegic to ever graduate from Cornell. But I knew industrial engineering really wasn't a viable field for me. This was well before laptop computers. And with my limited mobility, engineering just seemed like it would be really, really difficult for me to function in that role. So with the advice of my psychology professor, I changed and pursued a career in psychology. So I stayed at Cornell and I earned a Master of Arts degree where I majored in counseling and student personnel administration. And I became the first quadriplegic to earn a graduate degree from Cornell. And then to increase my counseling credentials, I went to Columbia University, where I obtained my second master's degree. This was a Master of Education degree where I majored in psychological counseling and rehabilitation. And I decided to look for a job as a rehabilitation counselor. And I was fairly confident that with 2 degrees from Cornell and 1 from Columbia, 3 prestigious Ivy League degrees, 2 master's degrees, that I shouldn't have too much difficulty securing employment. Well, to my dismay, no one would hire me. I looked for a job for over a year and sent out more than 200 resumes. I was even turned down when I offered to volunteer my services, because back then it seemed everybody felt I was just too disabled to work. And finally, I found one organization willing to give me the opportunity to show what I could do. And that organization is on Long Island. It's called Abilities Incorporated, which is part of the Viscardi Center. It's named after its founder, Dr. Henry Viscardi Jr., and they hired me to work as a vocational rehabilitation counselor for other individuals who had severe disabilities.
That is a phenomenal story, but I know there's a little bit more to that we'll talk about in a few minutes. But can you tell us, how did your injuries change your view of yourself and what you thought your life was going to be like?
Well, it totally changed my view of myself. I mean, before I was injured, if somebody would have asked me to describe myself, I would have probably described myself as an athlete, would have been the first thing I said. In high school, I was on the football team and the wrestling team. Mm-hmm. I played on various intramural softball teams. I worked during the summer as a lifeguard. And I probably would have said, and oh, by the way, I was a fairly good student as well. Good enough to get into Cornell, but I thought of myself first as an athlete. So suddenly here I am with very limited movement in my body and have to totally rely on my mind and not my physical abilities. So it totally changed my outlook of myself.
How did you learn to cope and live life? Because that's a question that I get all the time. And I don't know that I necessarily have a good answer, even though I watched my father go through this process. So can you please give us some insights?
Sure. I mean, it took a long time to adjust to my new condition. I went from being very independent to being totally dependent on others for everything that I needed. So it took quite a while, but I was very fortunate that I had a very supportive family who encouraged me every step of the way, still assuring me that there was a lot I could do with my life. And they basically assured me that they would act as my arms and legs if need be, to make sure I could still do everything I wanted to do. And with that help, encouragement, and support, I was able to go back to school, continue my education, and eventually get a job.
How about friends? I've seen this happen in people's lives, and probably in your life and my life, is that a friend that I thought was a friend didn't turn out to be a friend when I needed them. So other than your family, can you tell us how did your friends deal with you, and how did you deal with them in this changed circumstances?
Well, I had a number of close friends from high school who stayed very close friends, and I was very fortunate with that. My friends in college, I had fraternity brothers and football teammates that, of course, I was very friendly with, and they remained friends of mine. But I have to say that many of those individuals I related in terms of being an athlete and playing ball with them, playing sports with them. Now it was a very different relationship because we were relating on very different levels. No longer were we talking about, what it was like to go out on the practice field or play in a game. We were talking more about schoolwork and what it was like with after school activities. So it really had to change a lot with my relationship to a lot of people. And I always thought of myself as a bit of an introvert before I was injured. I used to sit in the very back of a classroom, never raise my hand in class, and hope I wouldn't be noticed. And now suddenly, out of necessity, I was usually sitting in front of the front row in many classes and had to talk for making sure that every one of my needs was satisfied. And it really changed the way I had to look at myself as well as the way I was dealing with others.
Which leads me to the next question. How did you learn to deal with people's perception of you and not the reality of you?
Well, it certainly took a while, and it was a very slow process. But I remember not long after I returned to school, I went to a fraternity party, and I was talking with some of my old fraternity brothers. And one of them commented, after speaking to me for a while, he said, "You're still the same old Kunk." Kunk was my nickname. Meaning, after he spoke with me for a while, he realized I'm the same person. My disability didn't change me as a person. So, it took a while to be, again, doing stuff, basically talking with others as opposed to physically doing things with others. But, I tried to keep a pleasant attitude, a sunny disposition, and not to depress people with what my problems were, but rather still have a good time with the people I was with.
Obviously, you have, I'm going to put this in quotes, a physical disability. A lot of my clients also have what we call invisible disabilities. It might be fibromyalgia. It might be some sort of a chronic pain condition. And so people see them, but they don't appear to be disabled, yet they in fact are disabled. Do you have any suggestions for a person who suffers from chronic pain or another medical condition that isn't visible, but yet they have to deal with people's perception of them?
Well, one, if it affects the way that they function in life, I think it's important to share that with people that you feel confident would keep any type of confidences that you have in sharing, so that people understand if there's something physically you cannot do because it's either very uncomfortable or painful or just physically not doable, that they be aware of it so that they don't put you in awkward situations. But by the same token, I think it's important when you get a close friend to let them know exactly what your likes and dislikes are, what your condition might limit you from doing, but also enable you to still enjoy doing, so that you can have a more fulfilling relationship with others.
Sometimes my clients will tell me, particularly in fibromyalgia cases, that their family or friends just don't understand their fatigue levels and their need or their brain fog. And that people will say, well, if you just slept more, or if you exercised, or if you did this, you wouldn't be in this pain. You wouldn't have the brain fog. What suggestions do you have for people who have that sort of experience, if you will, when someone doesn't necessarily believe them or makes suggestions that really aren't consistent with the nature of their medical condition and yet are well-meaning?
I would get that all the time with my condition. I mean, there were so many people that would think if you just believed strong enough, you'll be able to move your arms and your legs. Perhaps if you were more religious, and had more faith, somehow you'd be able to do that. And it's very difficult to convince people that, no, I have a medical condition that basically inhibits and prohibits me from being able to do that. And, many people, they don't want to accept that because they want to think everything is going to be better and get better. And they would like to make it so if they could. So it's difficult to sometimes convince people, but sometimes just being with them more and showing them what the issues are that you face, hopefully people will not only become more accepting, but you'll make the decision of who you want to spend time with and what you want to do with others.
And that's a great point, because at some point in time, they're going to have to decide whether this relationship is worth maintaining because of, and ultimately, what I would consider disrespect, if you will, not respecting the individual's needs Any thoughts about that? Having to say this relationship isn't working anymore.
Absolutely. I mean, you need to pick your friends. You need to pick the time you want to spend time with, because sometimes they can bring you down if you're with a group that's not appropriate for you and your needs and your desires and your wants. And sometimes they put undue pressure on you. And you need to find a group of people that you are confident that you could be with and be yourself and enjoy being with. And it has to do also with finding your own support group, people that you could rely on for any help that you may need and any encouragement you may need. And I think the longer you're in your condition, the more you'll find what people are truly your friends and truly people you could rely on and want to spend time with, that won't bring you down, but rather will elevate your spirits. And you'll also find people that you can help in the process. And that makes a big difference in how you'll feel about yourself.
So, Ken, I'm going to ask you one more question before we take a break. What advice would you give to someone who has a life-changing medical condition or injury as they're dealing with not only the consequences of their medical condition, treatment, but their changed role and view of themselves?
That it's a very gradual process. While your condition may have changed overnight for some people, as mine did, it doesn't mean your way of dealing with it is going to change overnight. It could be a very long process, but hopefully you'll make steady progress in learning how to adjust to your disability, learning what makes you feel good, what are your limitations, how you can overcome them if you are able to, and not be impatient. And I believe everybody has an inner strength about them, something that they never realized they had, that just enables them to rise to the situation and overcome what many people may think are insurmountable odds. And I think once you set your mind to it and believe in yourself and believe there's still an awful lot you can do, even though you may have certain limitations, I think you'll feel better about yourself and you'll convey a more positive image to others about yourself.
Wow. Let's take a quick break. And I'm looking forward to coming back and talking with Ken about vocational insights, transitioning careers, and how he even ended up in law school. So let's take a quick break.
Great.